Right now, the foremost and largest problem that Mccoy Global faces is there is currently no solid policies and procedures around their CSR. Each business unit is left to their own devices to administer the CSR program. The situation is company-wide, and the lack of cohesive processes creates difficulties for the firm when trying to ensure good CSR work is being completed to stakeholders. If stakeholders are unaware of the CSR practices or unable to accurately measure their value, they may grow impatient with their current initiatives. Solving this problem would go a long way towards operational efficiency and scalability, with the added bonus of increasing employee morale from involvement in the community. For our first alternative, we have deploy a CSR task force. Mccoy Global could create a dedicated team comprising of employees from both countries to develop and implement a CSR program that is tailored to the firm's needs. The task force could establish a set of policies and guidelines that address issues such as community engagement, sustainability, and ethical business practices. This would ensure that all business units adhere to a standardized process and it could be scaled to meet the firm's growth. The big positives that come out of this one are the development of an organizational task force being very beneficial to the firm in creating an environment for employee cohesion and teamwork. The biggest negative, though, is that McCoy Global currently has no cohesive CSR strategy, meaning that the organization itself has no experience in developing a proven strategy. If the wrong leaders are selected, poor leadership and organizational decision making can stifle the efforts of the organization. Alternative 2, implement a CSR software platform. McCoy Global could adopt a CSR software platform that helps them manage and track their CSR initiatives. Such a platform could assist in consolidating data from various business units and countries, which would enable management to monitor and report on the progress of their CSR work. This would allow stakeholders to accurately measure the value of CSR initiatives, increasing their value in the program's success, increasing their confidence in the program's success. Effectively implemented CSR software improves efficiency and decision making with data usage. This is the biggest positive. A PwC survey of 1,000 business executives found that data-driven organizations were 3 times as likely to achieve major improvements in their decision-making capabilities. The biggest drawback is that it is the responsibility of the organization to make sure that all data collected is used for ethical purposes and is secure. If there is a potential data breach, the incident could be very harmful to data users, in addition to hurting the firm's reputation. Alternative 3, engage in an external consultant. McCoy Global could hire the services of an external consultant who specializes in CSR program development. The consultant could conduct an audit on the firm's existing CSR initiatives and then develop a customized program that is tailored to McCoy's needs. The consultant would also provide training to the employees on the CSR program, ensuring that the program is implemented effectively across all business units and countries. This would be an effective solution for a smaller company as it would provide them with the expertise needed to establish a scalable and efficient CSR program. The biggest positive is from this strategy alternative is that external leadership has proven strategies and expertise. The odds of improper implementation are much lower with a seasoned veteran in charge of organizational change. Their outside perspective will be able to effectively target weaknesses within the firm. The biggest drawback is that an expert is likely going to have to visit each of the locations in person. With the large distance between business units, this can become very time consuming and expensive. The third alternative is the most costly of all 3 options.
Creating a CSR task force would be a good way for Mccoy Global to address the lack of standardized CSR policies and procedures. This approach is consistent with the stakeholder theory, which emphasizes the importance of businesses considering the interests of all the stakeholders, including employees, customers, communities, and environment. Mccoy Global would be able to develop a CSR program that addresses the interest of all stakeholders and ensure that the firm's operations align with ethical principles and contribute to the greater good by forming a dedicated CSR task force. In order to implement this alternative, a team has decided and proposed an implementation plan. This implementation plan is been done in three phases, being phase one being pre-implementation plan, phase two being implementation plan itself, and phase three being monitoring and evaluation of that implementation plan. In phase one, that is pre-implementation plan phase, which lasts from month 1 to month 4, Mccoy Global will focus on pre-implementation activities that will lay the groundwork for a successful CSR program. In the first month, a dedicated CSR task force with representative from both Canada and United States will be formed, and specific rules and responsibilities will be assigned to ensure an effective program development and implementation. In the second month, the scope of the CSR program will be defined, including the establishment of program goals and objectives. In month 3 and 4, the task force will conduct research and benchmarking to identify the best practices in CSR from other companies in the industries, as well as KPI for the program. Phase 2, which is the implementation phase itself, is the most important phase of this implementation plan, as during the month 5th and 6th, Mccoy Global will create policies and guidelines for the CSR program based on the phase 1 research and benchmarking. The task force will develop a clear set of policies and guidelines for issues such as community engagement, sustainability, ethical business practices. These policies and guidelines will establish a consistent framework for all business units to adhere to. For months 7 to 12, roll out the CSR program to all business units will be the main part of those months. The task force will collaborate closely with each business unit to ensure program smooth implementation, providing training and resources as needed to ensure that all employees are aware of the policies and guidelines and understand how to apply them in their daily work. Finally, the last phase, which is phase 3, which includes monitoring and evaluation. In this phase, the CSR program will be continuously monitored and evaluated to ensure that the goals and objectives established in phase 1 are met. The task force will create a system for tracking KPIs and will conduct a regular assessment to determine the program's effectiveness. Employees, customers, and community feedback will be incorporated into monitoring and evaluation to process to ensure that the program meets the needs of all the stakeholders. Any areas for improvements will be identified and addressed, and the program will be tweaked as necessary to ensure long-term success. In order to make this implementation plan a successful plan, we have to address some key players which would be affected by this implementation plan. And these players are key employees from both Canada and USA, senior management, and finally, leaders who will lead the task force. It is a stated fact that whenever we are applying a particular alternative, there are some resource limitation that comes with it. And this is the same case with our implementation and our selection of our alternative. In this case, One of the major resource limitations that we face is the time and resource required to form and manage the task force. Creating and managing a CSA task force requires significant time and resource investment. It will be critical to find individuals who are enthusiastic about CSR and have necessary skills and expertise to lead the program. The next major resource limitation that we face is training and resource required to implement the program itself. Implementing a CSR program across multiple business units, it's not an easy job. All employees will need to be educated on the task force policies and guidelines, and ongoing training and support will be required to ensure that the program is effectively implemented. And finally, the last major resource limitation that we may face is potential costs associated with partnership and community engagement initiatives. Depending on the scope and scale of these partnership, costs such as participation fees, material and resource costs, or costs associated with organizing events or initiatives may be incurred. Potential partnerships, and community engagement initiatives must be carefully evaluated to ensure that they align with CSR program's goal, and costs associated with them must be justified. Every implementation plan has some risks, and it's our responsibilities to identify those risks and state out the policies to mitigate them. In this case, one of the major risks that we have identified is a lack of buy-in from the key stakeholders. It can jeopardize the success of the CSR program itself. It is critical for a task force to consult with senior management and other stakeholders throughout the process. So, in order to ensure that their buy-in and support is good. To ensure that the program aligns with the firm's overall strategy and objective, the task force should solicit solicit feedback and input from key stakeholders. And this is how they can mitigate this risk. The next risk that we identified is inadequate research and benchmarking can also jeopardize the CSR program success. To reduce this risk, the task force should have access to relevant resources and expertise in order to ensure that the research and the benchmarking process is thorough and accurate. The next major risk that we identify is the task force may face difficulties in implementing a standardized program. Creating policies and guidelines that are specific to firms' need and culture can aid in ensuring that the program is standardized all across every business units. To ensure that the policies and guidelines are practical and feasible for implementation, the task force could also collaborate closely with employees and other stakeholders. And finally, the last risk that we identified is employees can also oppose their views against the CSR program. Employee resistance can be reduced by providing training and resources to them and involving them in the program development process. To build the support for this program, the task force can also work with employees to identify opportunities for employee engagement and recognition.